Louisville, Kentucky. A skinny kid ran through the early morning streets, his breath cutting the cold air, his footsteps echoing against brick and silence. He wasn't running from something. He was running toward a future no one else could see. His name was Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., and almost everyone thought he talked too much. At 12 years old, Cassius had his bicycle stolen. Furious and shaking, he reported it to a police officer named Joe Martin. Cassius told him he wanted to beat up the thief. Martin listened quietly, then said something that would redirect history. "You better learn how to fight first." He invited the boy to a boxing gym in the basement of a local community center. That gym smelled of sweat, dust, and old leather. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't famous. But for Cassius, it was a stage. From the beginning, he was different. Not just fast, unnaturally fast. Not just confident, loudly, unapologetically confident. He talked while he trained. He talked while he sparred. He talked while he won. Most fighters were taught to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Cassius did the opposite. He predicted victories before fights. He rhymed insults at opponents. He smiled when others scowled. To many trainers and promoters, he was a problem. By the time he reached the national amateur circuit, the whispers followed him everywhere. Talented but immature. Fast but sloppy. Athletic but not serious. He didn't look like a champion. He didn't behave like one. And worst of all, he refused to be humble. In 1960, Cassius Clay stood on the Olympic stage in Rome. 20 years old, light heavyweight division. America watched with cautious optimism. Then he won. Gold medal. The country celebrated the medal, but not the man. Cassius returned home a hero on paper, yet still an outsider in spirit. In segregated America, a young black athlete with a loud mouth and no patience for deference made people uncomfortable. He was expected to be grateful. He chose to be bold. As he entered the professional ranks, the boxing establishment tried to shape him, quiet him, polish him, restrain him. He resisted every attempt. He spoke openly to the press. He mocked former champions. He declared himself beautiful in a world that told him he shouldn't. "I am the greatest," when he said. Long before he had proven it, the reaction was swift and dismissive. Sports writers called him a clown. Veterans called him disrespectful. Fans called him annoying. And looming over all of it was one name: Sonny Liston. Liston wasn't just the heavyweight champion. He was fear itself. A man with a criminal past, stone hands, and a reputation for ending fights quickly and brutally. He didn't talk. He didn't smile. He destroyed. When Cassius Clay became the #1 contender, the matchup was treated like a joke with a deadline. No one believed the loud kid could survive the monster. Bookmakers laughed. Journalists sharpened their punchlines. Opponents shook their heads. Clay leaned into the ridicule. He called Liston slow. He called him ugly. He promised to dance, sting, and embarrass him. He predicted the round of victory with theatrical certainty. Behind the scenes, however, something else was happening. Cassius trained with obsessive precision. He studied angles. He refined footwork. He practiced slipping punches by inches, sometimes millimeters. While others relied on brute force, he relied on timing and space. He wasn't just preparing to win a fight. He was preparing to shatter expectations. On February 25th, 1964, in Miami Beach, the arena buzzed with disbelief. This wasn't supposed to be competitive. It was supposed to be a public execution. Cassius entered the ring yelling, moving, smiling. His heart rate so high officials worried he was panicking. He wasn't. He was exactly where he wanted to be. What followed would not just change a title. It would fracture the identity of American sports culture. But that moment, that night, was still seconds away. Because before Cassius Clay could become Muhammad Ali, before the name, before the exile, before the legend, he first had to prove that being loud didn't mean being weak, and that believing in yourself when no one else does is the most dangerous weapon of all. Miami Beach, February 25th, 1964. The fight ended not with a knockout, but with disbelief. Sonny Liston didn't come out for round 7. In the champion's corner, trainers stared at him in shock as he complained of pain in his shoulder. Across the ring, Cassius Clay jumped, shouted, and demanded the world listen. What had been dismissed as arrogance was now fact. The loud kid had done the impossible. At 22, Cassius Clay was the heavyweight champion of the world. But victory didn't bring peace. It brought scrutiny. Within hours of the fight, reporters crowded around him. Cameras flashed, microphones pressed in, and instead of thanking promoters or praising tradition, Cassius spoke about something else entirely: his faith, his beliefs, and a future that did not include playing the role America expected of him. Days later, he announced his new name. He was no longer Cassius Clay. He was Muhammad Ali. For many Americans, this was not just confusing, it was threatening. The name Cassius Clay felt familiar, controllable, historical. Muhammad Ali sounded foreign, defiant, unapologetic. Sports pages turned cold. Some journalists refused to use the new name. Broadcasters mocked it. Promoters worried. Fans felt betrayed. To them, the champion had crossed an invisible line, one that separated athletic greatness from political and cultural discomfort. Ali didn't explain himself. He didn't negotiate. He didn't soften the message. "This is my name," he said. "I didn't choose it. It was given to me." In a country already tense with civil rights protests, assassinations, and unrest, Ali became more than a boxer. He became a symbol, whether he wanted to or not. And then came the draft notice. 1967. The Vietnam War was escalating, and young men across America were being sent overseas. When Ali was called for induction into the U.S. Army, the expectation was simple: comply quietly. Ali did not. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," he said. "No Viet Cong ever called me nari er." Those words detonated across the nation. To some, he was courageous. To others, he was a traitor. The consequences were immediate and brutal. His boxing license was suspended. His heavyweight title was stripped. He was banned from fighting in every major jurisdiction. At 25 years old, at the absolute physical peak of his life, Muhammad Ali was erased from his profession. No fights, no income, no platform, only courtrooms. Ali faced up to 5 years in prison for draft evasion. He traveled the country not to compete, but to speak. College halls, small theaters, quiet rooms where microphones replaced punching bags. He talked about conscience, or about belief, about the cost of standing still when the world demands you bend. Behind the speeches, the reality was harsher. Training alone, watching younger fighters rise, feeling time, his most precious resource, slip away. Many champions would have disappeared. Some advised him to apologize and others urged compromise. Ali refused. He had already paid the price of his name. He would not discount it now. For 3.5 years, the greatest heavyweight in the world was invisible by force. The public debate around him never stopped, but the ring stayed empty. Then in 1970, the door cracked open. After mounting pressure and shifting public sentiment, Ali was granted permission to fight again. The world leaned forward. Some expected rust, others expected collapse. What they got was fire. Ali returned with speed intact and conviction sharpened. But the exile had changed him. He was older, slower by inches, wiser by miles. And waiting for him was another test, one not just of skill, but of identity. Joe Frazier, younger, stronger, relentless. Their first meeting wasn't just a boxing match. It was framed as a moral clash, a cultural referendum, a question the country needed answered. Ali lost that fight. For the first time, the self-proclaimed greatest tasted defeat. And yet, something unexpected happened. The loss did not diminish him. It humanized him. Because Ali didn't retreat. He didn't deny reality. He didn't hide behind excuses. He returned to the gym, rebuilt his body, and reshaped his approach. The exile had taken years. The loss took ego. What remained was something stronger. Muhammad Ali was no longer just a loud kid who won a title. He was a man who had lost everything and chosen not to surrender himself. And the most dangerous chapter of his story was still ahead. By the early 1970s, the world had changed, and so had he. The speed was still there, but it no longer looked effortless. The footwork was lighter, but no longer playful. Muhammad Ali had learned something exile could teach better than any trainer. You don't always win by avoiding pain. Sometimes you win by surviving it. After losing to Joe Frazier, many believed the story was finished. Champions weren't supposed to lose their invincibility. Ali had built his identity on being untouchable, and now he had been touched. But Ali didn't chase perfection anymore. He chased purpose. He adjusted his style. He conserved energy. He leaned into endurance rather than speed. And slowly, deliberately, he worked his way back toward the summit, one fight at a time. Then came Zaire, October 30th, 1974. Across from him stood George Foreman, younger, stronger, undefeated, and demolishing everyone placed in front of him. Foreman wasn't just winning fights, he was breaking men. The consensus was nearly unanimous. Ali couldn't survive this. The heat was suffocating. The crowd was volatile. The stakes were absolute. Ali entered the ring not as the favorite, but as the memory of what he once was. What happened next wasn't a boxing lesson. It was a revelation. Ali leaned against the ropes. He let Foreman punch. He absorbed blow after blow while whispering taunts between breaths. The strategy would later be named, but in that moment, it looked like suicide. Round after round, Foreman emptied himself. Ali waited. In the eighth round, when the punches slowed and the arms dropped, Ali stepped forward and ended it. The world stopped. That night, Ali didn't just reclaim the heavyweight title. He reclaimed authorship of his own legend. He had been stripped. He had been banned. He had been doubted. He had been beaten. And still, he stood. The remaining years were not gentle. Ali continued fighting longer than he should have. The reflexes dulled. The damage accumulated. Each victory came at a greater physical cost. By the end, the price was visible in his hands, his speech, his stillness. But something else became clear. The man who once shouted for attention no longer needed to speak. When Parkinson's disease entered his life, Ali faced it the same way he had faced exile, without retreat. He appeared in public not to inspire pity, but resolve. He carried the Olympic torch with trembling hands and unbreakable dignity. The world finally understood what it had witnessed. Not a boxer who talked too much. Not a champion who refused the draft. Not a loud kid who demanded belief, but a man who paid every price demanded by conscience and never asked for it back. Today, Muhammad Ali is remembered not because he was undefeated. He wasn't. He is remembered because when history tried to silence him, slow him, strip him, and break him, he answered with presence. True greatness, Ali taught the world, isn't proven in the moment you win. It's proven in the years after, when time itself has every reason to forget you and still refuses to let you go. The later years of Ali's life forced the world to confront a difficult truth. Greatness does not retire when the body does. As his movements slowed, a different kind of speed emerged. Clarity. The man who once filled rooms with noise now filled them with meaning. Interviews became quieter. Jokes became rarer. But when Ali spoke, people leaned in. Not because of what he might say, but because of what he had already lived. He became a reference point. When athletes questioned authority, Ali was the example they pointed to. When public figures spoke about conscience, his story set the boundary between convenience and conviction. He had made a choice at a moment when choices were expensive, and paid for it in real time, not hindsight. In private, the cost was relentless. Parkinson's disease took pieces of him slowly, without drama. The hands that once danced now shook. The voice that once commanded arenas became fragile. But Ali never hid from the decline. He allowed the world to see him as he was, not to inspire sympathy, but to complete the truth of his story. Strength, he showed, does not disappear. It changes form. In 1996, in Atlanta, the world watched in silence as Muhammad Ali stood before the Olympic cauldron. His body trembled. His movements were careful. But when he raised the torch, there was no doubt left. This was not a man diminished. This was a man distilled. The roar that followed wasn't about boxing. It wasn't about titles or records. It was recognition. Late, overdue, and unanimous. The same country that once stripped him now stood to honor him. And Ali accepted it without bitterness. That may have been his final victory, because he never asked the world to agree with him, only to remember what it cost to stand firm. He never demanded applause, only the freedom to live honestly. And when time eventually took his speed, his voice, and his body, it could not take the example he left behind. Ali changed how athletes understood themselves. He proved they could be thinkers, not just performers, citizens, not just entertainers. He widened the definition of courage beyond physical risk and into moral terrain. Long after the gloves were gone, his presence remained. Children learned his name without seeing his fights. Adults repeated his words without remembering where they heard them first. His image lived on, not frozen in victory, but evolving through struggle. History often rewards those who bend at the right moment. Ali never bent, and that is why his legacy does not belong to boxing alone. It belongs to anyone who has ever been told to be quieter, smaller, more convenient, and refused. Because in the end, Muhammad Ali didn't just fight opponents in a ring. He fought time. He fought fear. He fought the demand to be less than himself, and he won. Not quickly, not easily, but permanently. Extended conclusion complete.